Hi everyone, my name is Zoranne and welcome back to my channel. It's been a minute since I've made a YouTube video. There's not really a reason for it. I get in these groups where I get really motivated to film long form content and then I fall off the wagon and then I get back on and then I fall off again. And the problem lies, it's me, I'm the problem. And I always say I want to get better at YouTube. I want to prove to myself that it is worth investing in a real vlog camera and not filming on my iPhone, even though this looks like kind of good for this looks really good for an iPhone. I want to prove to myself that like I can do it, but the consistency is not there and I have no one to blame but myself. But today I had the motivation to film a YouTube video, so here we are. And today, by the title, you can probably tell that we are going to be chatting about my most anticipated fantasy reads this fall. And I'm so excited about this video because fall always brings in the heavy hitters. The most anticipated releases of the year always come out in fall because the holidays are coming, people are gonna be buying gifts, and fall is just the perfect time to stay inside, cozy up with a good book, specifically like a chunky fantasy book, and just get right to it. Before I dive into today's video, I want to quickly mention that I do have a subscriber community on my Bindery platform where you can support me in the content I make online for as little as a cup of coffee per month. And in exchange, you receive exclusive content from me where it's early access to YouTube videos, voting power in my book club, and just behind the scenes content of the publishing journey we've been on as the Fantasy and Friends community, because Fantasy and Friends currently has 2 acquisitions under our belt. One of them is And the Sky Bled by S. Hati, which is coming out in October, which I will talk more about in this video. I can't wait to talk about it. And we also have Crueler Mercies slated for publication in May 2025. So if you want to support me and my content and get a front row seat to the publishing journey that is Fantasy and Friends at Bindery, the link to subscribe to that community is in my bio. But without further ado, let's get chatting about my most anticipated fall fantasy reads. All of these books are going to be published from September through November of 2024. The first book I'm going to be talking about actually has already been published. It came out on September 3rd, but I'm putting it in this video anyways because it's my YouTube channel. I make the rules. It's Barbie's Dream House, not Kim's Dream House. But I'm excited to talk to you about this book because one of my favorite fantasy authors today is Andrea Stewart, and she had a new release, and that is The Gods Below. I love Andrea Stewart. I have read her Drowning Empire trilogy, and one of my favorite things about that series is the rich and imaginative world building she can pull off, and I have no doubt that that world building also takes place in The Gods Below. This is the first book in a new fantasy trilogy from Andrea, and it has got great early reviews. In The Gods Below, we are following 2 sisters that live in a world that is divided by war. At some point in this world's history, humans struck a deal with a god to help restore their world to its former glory, and the price was steep. The land was transformed, and so were its people. Our main character, Hakara, was not willing to pay that price, so she takes her sister, and they flee their homeland to find, essentially, a better life. There is a tragedy that separates the sisters Hakara and Rasha, and now they must find their way back to each other. But of course, in a fantasy world, that is going to prove difficult. Now that Hakara is alone, separated from her sister Rasha, on the other side of the world, she discovers that she can channel an unknown magic from the mysterious gemstones that the god Clune forces them to mine. And I'm just going to read straight from the jacket. It says, "With that discovery comes another. Her sister is alive, and the rebels plotting to destroy the God Pact can help rescue her, but only if Hakara goes to war against a god." This sounds so good and right up my alley. I'm so excited about The Gods Below. I've had mutuals who have read this and really loved it. And like I said, Andrea Stewart always excels at writing really compelling characters and even richer world building. So I can't wait to start this book and see what I think about it. This next book I just added to my list because I saw a few TikTok videos about it, and what can I say, I've been influenced. And so right before filming this video, I added this book to my list. And this book also came out on September 3rd, so we are going to be winging the synopsis. And that book is Immortal Dark by Tigist Girma. And Immortal Dark is a young adult romantic dark fantasy with vampires. And from those words alone, that's all I needed to know to add it to my TBR. Immortal Dark is described as Cruel Prince meets Ninth House. I haven't read either of those books, embarrassingly enough, but here we are. And it is about how a lost heiress must infiltrate an arcane society and live with the vampire she suspects killed her family and kidnapped her sister. We're getting similar themes from like The Gods Below and Immortal Dark. We've got familial ties, missing sisters, and I'm here for that. The synopsis says, "Orphaned heiress Kidan Edane grew up far from the arcane society she was born into, where human bloodlines gain power through vampire companionship. And when her sister June disappears, Kidan is convinced a vampire stole her, the very vampire bound to their family, the cruel yet captivating Susenyo Segad. Obviously, Kidan's mission is to find her sister, and the only way to do that is to infiltrate the Uxley University, where students study to ensure peaceful coexistence between humans and vampires. Literally, what could go wrong? Probably everything, and that's why the book exists, but you never know. Maybe it's peaceful, maybe it's cozy. It's definitely not that. Kidan must survive living with Susenyos, even as he does everything he can to drive her away. It doesn't matter that Susenyos' wickedness speaks to Kidan's own violent nature and tempts her to surrender to a life of darkness. She must find her sister and kill Susenyos at all costs. When a murder mirroring June's disappearance shakes Uxley, Kidan sinks further into the ruthless underworld of vampires. Risking her very soul, will she become a vampire? Will she? I hope so. Or maybe I hope not. I don't know what I hope. But there's a chance she could become a vampire. It doesn't say that. I'm just speaking out of my ass. There, she discovers a centuries-old threat, and June could be at the center of it. To save her sister, Kidan must bring Uxley to its knees and either break free from the horrors of her own actions or embrace the dark entanglements of love and the blood it requires. Maybe she will become a vampire, and maybe she'll fall in love, and maybe things are not what they seem. This is a young adult fantasy after all. Anyways, I know I wasn't super prepared to talk about that book, but I wanted to tell you about it anyways because it sounds so freaking good. And honestly, I don't think I've read a banging vampire book since I read A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. So I feel like I'm due. The world needs vampires. I feel like 2024 has been the year of the vampire, and I'm not mad about it. So there you go, Immortal Dark by Tigist Girma. This third book comes out on October 1st, and I'm so happy to say that I have read an arc of this book and I absolutely loved it. It is one of my favorite reads of this year, and I won't hold you any longer, but that book was Air by Sabaa Tahir. I could scream about this book. I wish I could scream about this book because it's not out yet, so there's only so much I can say about it, so my goal is just to influence you to either pre-order it or buy it on release day and then be able to scream about it with me. You may or may not have heard of Sabaa Tahir because she wrote The Ember and the Ashes Quartet, which is one of my favorite young adult series of all time. It has such amazing characters, such amazing writing, world building, one of the most violent young adult series I have ever read. Honestly, it is great adult crossover. So if you typically read adult fantasy and you want to read something really snappy, fast-paced, and really, really fun, but also has that darkness that you might come to find and like in adult fantasy, I encourage you to check out The Ember and the Ashes Quartet. I don't think you'll be let down. I'm mentioning those books to say that Air takes place in the world of Ember and the Ashes, but it is set 20 years in the future, and it follows a character that is connected to one of the main characters in Ember. The author has said you can read Air without reading The Ember and the Ashes Quartet, and since I've already read this book, I see what she's saying, but I think if you read The Ember and the Ashes Quartet prior to reading Air, you will have a much richer reading experience. You'll understand all the callbacks, you'll get more world building under your belt, and I feel like you'll appreciate the characters in the story that she wrote so much more knowing that information. But if you haven't read Ember, you could read this. I just don't think it'll hit the same. So now you're like, okay, Zoranne, tell me what Air is about. Okay, fine, I'll do it. Air is a multi-POV story where one character is an orphan, one character is a prince, and the other one is an outcast. And through these three POVs, you know that there is a killer on the loose, and that killer is trying to bring the Empire to its knees. A little bit about these POVs. The prince main character, his name is Quill, and he is the heir to the Martial Empire, but he has no desire to rule. He has been trained his whole life to be the emperor of this empire that he never wanted to inherit, and so you're kind of following him through his everyday life and the struggles with coming to terms of being his aunt's heir. And then there's also Saoirse, and she is an outcast from her family's clan, and she was outcast because she did some illegal magic, and basically she was exiled from her family. Saoirse completes contracts to get by, to make money, and to avoid the wrath of her family if they ever found her. And what's interesting about Saoirse is that her innate magic allows her to speak to the earth, and the earth speaks back, so she is a really good tracker. One of the best, in fact, and that will come into play in the main plot of this book. And the third POV is Eyes, and she is a young girl from the province of Kadar who is one of the rival nations of the Martial Empire, and her people are starving, they're oppressed, and they are trying to get their footing in the world. And they have discovered the power of flight using magic. And so at this time, her country is trying to invade the Martial Empire because they have a magical substance that they need access to in order to fly. And so through these 3 POVs, and while there's a killer on the loose, all of these characters, their paths will intertwine. Air comes together to be a ruthless story of love, unchecked greed, tragedy, and jaw-dropping moments. I cannot sing these books' praises enough. I can't wait for the world to read it, and for that, it is one of my most anticipated releases this fall because I need people to scream about it with. Okay, now I may be biased, but truly my most anticipated release this year is And the Sky Bled by S. Hattie, which is the first book that my imprint at Bindery, Fantasy and Friends, is publishing. And this book will be out into the world on October 15th, and I am so excited yet so nervous for this book to release because not only am I so in love with this story and so proud of Sewell as an author, but also my name is attached to this book. So I desperately want it to do well, and I desperately want readers to love it as much as I did. I originally read this book as a manuscript, and it is on the darker side of fantasy. It's a climate fantasy, and it's a standalone. And so there's a lot of appeal there, but I'm really excited to tell people about it, and I really want people to add it to their TBRs because I'm just so proud of Sewell and this story and the fact that I have the opportunity to publish books that will eventually be out into the world. And the Sky Bled takes place in an occupied city called Tejumaya, where it is the only place in the world where a magical fossil fuel called Calor is found, and that Calor comes from the blood rains. And like I said, Calor is a magical fossil fuel, so it is used in every aspect of society. And at the start of this book, there has been a 6-month drought. So basically, the economy in the world has come to a standstill because technology and innovation rely on this fossil fuel of Calor to operate. Our main character, Zane, is a street rat, and she is forced to smuggle Calor for her slumlord bosses. And smuggling this magical fossil fuel is the only key to her freedom. And we follow another character named Iravan, who is a slumlord, and his reason for seeking out Calor is to be able to save the people in the slums, the people that he has sworn his life to protect, because there is a devastating illness that is wreaking havoc on the slums, and he wants to obviously save them so people don't die. And then our third POV is an older woman named Anastasia Dracos, and she is one of the colonizers of this city of Tejumaya, and she lives on an island far away where she doesn't have to live in those slums and live like the people of Tejumaya do. She is vying for a seat on the city's council so she can finally take out the slums and rule with an unyielding fist. And since the blood rains haven't come for 6 months, people are in desperate need of Calor to survive, and people have heard stories that there is a chance that a hidden cache of Calor, of magic, is hidden underneath the city, and so Zane, Iravan, and Anastasia are all racing to find it for their own personal reasons. And of course, with a multi-POV story, all 3 of these characters are connected by a tragedy that happened years ago, and you'll just have to read to find out what happens next. And the Sky Bled releases on October 15th, and I seriously cannot wait for this book to be out in the world. And if you want a hardcover version like this is the Bindery exclusive edition that can only be found on Bindery's website. I will link it down below. And if you are one of my Bindery members, you get a great discount on this hardcover edition or any of the other Bindery books coming out this fall. And I'm super excited about this book. I can't wait for y'all to read it. Okay, now probably my most anticipated release of this fall, besides And the Sky Bled, truly the one I am most excited about, comes out on October 22nd, and that is The Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne. The whole world is waiting for this book. It is book 3 in the Bloodsworn trilogy. The first book is The Shadow of the Gods, the follow-up is The Hunger of the Gods, and it is a Norse-inspired epic fantasy trilogy for the ages with politics, vengeance, battles. I can't really talk about the synopsis of The Fury of the Gods without spoiling the first two books, but in The Shadow of the God, like I said, The Shadow of the Gods is a Norse-inspired epic fantasy trilogy that takes place in a world where the gods are dead. They were all killed in a Ragnarok-style event, and what's left of the gods are people who are considered to be tainted, who hail from the bloodlines of the gods, and if they are a descendant of one of the gods, they are able to have godlike powers and shift, not like wolf shifters, but they reap the benefits of being a descendant of the god, except people who have god blood in their veins are considered tainted and a menace to society, and so they are often rounded up and become thrall slaves. But in The Shadow of the Gods, we're following three main POV characters. We've got Orca, who is on a quest for vengeance. We've got Elvar, who is a member of a war band called the Battlegrim, and she is trying to seek battle fame since she is one of the youngest members of the Battlegrim. And we're also following a third POV named Varg, who is a thrall who's trying to become a member of another warband called the Bloodsworn. And so all three of our main characters are on different quests, and their storylines will eventually merge. And it is just one of the most epic fantasy stories I have ever freaking read. And like I said, I cannot wait for the Fury of the Gods. I'm chomping at the bit, and October 22nd cannot come fast enough. And finally, coming out on October 29th, we have a book that was originally self-published, but then got picked up for traditional publishing. So the re-release of this book is October 29th, and that book is Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong. You may recognize this name because M.L. Wong is the author of The Sword of Kaigen, which is one of my favorite books of all time, and it deserves all of the recognition it gets because it is truly a masterpiece of a novel. But she's got a new book, and that is Blood Over Brighthaven. Like I said, it is getting traditionally published on October 29th. And so this is the self-published edition of Blood Over Brighthaven. This was originally published in July of 2023. So this edition is now out of print. So many people have already read Blood Over Brighthaven and loved it. Now, and I've had this book for a while, but I never got around to reading it because often with self-published books, audiobooks are not published right away because audiobooks are expensive to produce if you are a self-published author. But since this is getting republished traditionally by Del Rey, there is going to be an audiobook also published on October 29th, and I can't wait because for me, I mainly read via audiobook. Eyeball reading is hard for me. Say what you want about it, but I have been waiting to read this until the audiobook comes out so I can read and listen at the same time, and I'm so excited for this book. And Blood Over Brighthaven is a very different story than The Sword of Kaigen. It takes place in a completely different universe. It's kind of industrial, kind of steampunk, dark academia. It's been compared to Babel by R.F. Kuang. This follows our main character, Sayona, who has dedicated her whole life to studying magic and becoming the first woman to ever be admitted to the High Magistry. And when Sayona finally claws her way up the ranks and becomes a High Mage, her classmates stop at nothing to let her know that she is unwelcome, and they do not want a woman practicing magic, and they do not want her there as part of the High Magistry. One of the ways Sayona's colleagues let her know that she is unwelcome is that instead of giving her a lab assistant, they give her a janitor. And that janitor is another main character named Tamil. And what neither Sayona or her magical peers know about Tamil is that he is from outside the city of Tirana. It used to be a nomadic hunter, and it has been 10 years since Tamil survived the perilous crossing that killed the majority of his people. Working for a High Mage, Tamil sees the opportunity to finally understand why his people might have been killed and why he survived the crossing 10 years ago. And so we find out that Sayona and Tamil are going to work together, and they are going to uncover an ancient secret that could destroy them all. I've heard nothing but amazing things about Blood Over Brighthaven. Some people even say it's better than The Sword of Kaigen. I cannot wait to find out when the audiobook is finally available to me, because I know this book will probably become my entire personality when I read it. Alrighty friends, those are all of my most anticipated releases for fall of this year. I'm so excited by these books. My TBR is stacked, and I would love to know what your most anticipated release for this fall is. Tell me about it in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I'm so grateful you're here, and I hope you have a great day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye friends!